Hall of Miracle Ministry stood tall and majestic, its towering pillars reaching toward the heavens, a symbol of the church's power and influence. Every Sunday, the church's compound was filled with sleek cars and bustling crowds eager to witness the miracles of Evangelist Mike, the man believed to have direct contact with God. His reputation for healing the sick, casting out demons, and blessing the barren had spread far beyond the city. The air was filled with anticipation as ushers handed out cups of the church's famed water of blessings, a ritual no one questioned but everyone revered. Evangelist Mike was no ordinary pastor. His mansion on the outskirts of town was filled with luxury cars, some purchased, others gifted by grateful congregants. His private jet, a gift from a formerly barren couple, was a testament to the miracles he performed. Yet, few knew of the dark secret that lurked beneath the church's glossy exterior, a hidden room only Pastor Mike could access, where his power was sustained by sinister rituals. The Hall of Miracle Ministry buzzed with excitement one fateful Sunday as Pastor Mike prepared to deliver another powerful sermon. The massive church, filled to capacity with expectant worshipers, glowed under the brilliant chandeliers. The choir's harmonious voices echoed throughout the hall, lifting spirits with every note. In the midst of the worship, Pastor Mike stood up, raising his hands to silence the crowd. "Today, the Lord has chosen someone among us for a miracle," he declared, his voice rich and commanding. His gaze scanned the crowd before landing on a wealthy woman seated near the middle row. "Madam Alice," he called out, causing murmurs to ripple through the congregation. Alice, visibly shocked, stood up hesitantly. She approached the altar, her hands trembling. "How do you know my name?" she whispered. Pastor Mike smiled warmly. "The Lord revealed it to me," he said. "You have been barren for 8 years." Alice nodded tearfully. "Today it ends," he announced, laying hands on her. "But you must sow a seed for the Lord." Without hesitation, Alice handed him a blank check, and the congregation erupted into loud praises. Deep within the church lay a room that only Pastor Mike had access to, a secret shrine lined with strange symbols and dimly lit by flickering candles. At the center of the room was an ominous altar, upon which rested objects of dark rituals. Here, Pastor Mike communed with malevolent spirits that demanded a terrible price, a day-old baby every month. The midwife, Auntie Ruth, had been a loyal servant of the church for years. She never questioned the pastor's demands, though the task weighed heavily on her soul. She convinced herself that she was serving a higher purpose, and the generous payment she received made it easier to ignore her conscience. One evening, she placed another baby on the altar, her hands shaking as she prayed for forgiveness. The dark spirit hissed its approval, and Pastor Mike closed his eyes, basking in the evil power that surged through him. During another packed service, a frail woman entered the church, clutching her blind son's hand tightly. She fell to her knees before the altar, her tears soaking the floor. "Pastor, please help my son," she cried. "He has been blind since birth. I heard you can perform miracles." Pastor Mike approached the boy with practiced grace. He laid his hands on the child's head, chanting in a strange tongue. The boy suddenly screamed, "Mama, I can see!" The congregation erupted into wild cheers, praising Pastor Mike as the mother wept in joy. But among the crowd, a few staff members exchanged uneasy glances. The whispers of dark secrets were growing louder. The staff, especially the women, had grown wary of Pastor Mike. His inappropriate behavior toward female workers was an open secret, but fear of losing their jobs kept them silent. He claimed their work was for God, often refusing to pay the male staff as well. Despite the mounting suspicions, no one dared confront him. Who would question the anointing of a powerful man of God? One staff member muttered to another. But the unease lingered like a shadow that refused to leave. Precious, a young woman in her 30s, arrived at the Hall of Miracle Ministry seeking a solution to her loneliness. She had moved to the area after hearing of Pastor Mike's miracles. During her first service, Pastor Mike pointed directly at her. "Precious," he called. "Come forward." Stunned, she walked to the altar. "You've been searching for a spouse, but none has come," Pastor Mike declared. "Today, that curse will be broken." Tears streamed down Precious's face as the congregation erupted in praise. After the service, Pastor Mike invited Precious to his office. The room was lavishly decorated, filled with expensive furniture. "The Lord has revealed to me the cause of your loneliness," he said. "To break the curse, we must share a union." Precious's face contorted in shock and disgust. "How dare you?" she shouted, storming out of the office, slamming the door behind her. Outside, she struggled to reconcile the holy man on the pulpit with the man who had just propositioned her. Despite her initial anger, Precious found herself spiraling into desperation. She yearned for the life Pastor Mike promised, a husband, a family, a future. She wrestled with her conscience, replaying the pastor's words over and over. Finally, she decided to return to his office. "Are you ready to do what it takes to receive your miracle?" Pastor Mike asked smugly. Precious nodded silently, tears streaming down her face. The church continued to grow, with more miraculous healings and prophetic declarations. Pastor Mike introduced expensive spiritual products, sickness-free oil, long-life water, and problem-solver oil that only the wealthy could afford. The poor sacrificed everything, but their lives remained unchanged. Precious watched with growing doubt, feeling the weight of her decision. Auntie Ruth, the midwife, was tormented by her role in the dark rituals. She began to question Pastor Mike's authority and her own complicity. One night, she knelt before the altar, begging for forgiveness, but the spirits demanded more. She resolved to leave the church, but fear for her life kept her rooted. Precious discovered she was pregnant, and a chill ran down her spine. She remembered the strange warnings she had heard about Pastor Mike. Her pregnancy felt like both a blessing and a curse. During the next service, Pastor Mike's demeanor changed. He sensed something was wrong. "Precious, are you pregnant?" he demanded during the sermon. The congregation froze in shock. Pastor Mike felt his power slipping, and for the first time fear flickered in his eyes. The congregation buzzed with stunned whispers as Precious stood frozen under Pastor Mike's accusatory gaze. Her heart pounded, and her legs felt like lead. "Yes," she replied softly, her voice barely audible over the murmurs. Pastor Mike's eyes narrowed. "Did you sin against the Lord to conceive this child?" he boomed, his tone filled with false righteousness. Precious's lips trembled, but before she could answer, another voice rang out. "She did nothing wrong," shouted Auntie Ruth, stepping forward. "The real sinner is you, Pastor Mike." Gasps rippled through the congregation. Ruth's courage emboldened others. Precious felt the weight lift as Ruth continued. "You've used this church as a cover for your wickedness. How many innocent women have you deceived? How many children have been sacrificed? Pandemonium erupted in the hall. Members yelled in disbelief, some weeping, others accusing Pastor Mike of being a fraud. The deacons rushed to calm the crowd, but it was futile. Pastor Mike, visibly shaken, raised his hands. "These are lies from the pit of hell. I am a servant of God." But the conviction in his voice had vanished. Precious stepped forward. "I was desperate, and you took advantage of me," she said, her voice clear and steady. "You promised miracles, but all you brought was pain." Others began to step forward, each telling stories of abuse, exploitation, and deceit. The illusion shattered, and Pastor Mike realized his grip was slipping. As the crowd pressed in, Pastor Mike attempted to flee through the back exit, but several men blocked his path. "Where are you going, Pastor?" one of them sneered. "It's time you answer for your crimes." Desperation painted his face. "I can explain," he pleaded. "The miracles were real. You've all seen them." But no one listened. They dragged him to the center of the hall, demanding answers. Police officers soon arrived, called by one of the deacons. Pastor Mike was handcuffed, his face a mask of disbelief. "This is persecution," he cried. "You are all betraying God's anointed." The police conducted a search of the church. Guided by Auntie Ruth, they uncovered the hidden room. The grisly altar, the dark symbols, and the sinister objects told a chilling story. The officers were horrified. Photographs were taken, and the evidence was overwhelming. The media descended on the church, and within hours, the Hall of Miracle Ministry was the top story across the nation. The congregation was left in ruins, their faith shaken to its core. Many wept openly, mourning the loss of trust and the betrayal by the man they had revered. Others felt a deep sense of shame for believing in the lies for so long. Precious found herself at the center of it all, no longer a victim, but a voice for the truth. "We need to rebuild," she told the gathered members. "Not the church, but ourselves. We need healing." Pastor Mike was charged with multiple crimes, including fraud, sexual assault, and ritualistic practices. His trial became a national spectacle, with former congregants testifying against him. Auntie Ruth, though complicit, was granted leniency for coming forward. She began counseling others, determined to make amends for her part in the atrocities. Precious gave birth to a healthy baby boy, naming him David, a symbol of triumph over adversity. She moved to a new town, determined to build a new life free from the shadows of Pastor Mike's deception. I hope you enjoyed the story. If so, please like the video, share it with your family and friends, comment on it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and tap on the notification bell for more interesting stories like this one.